So welcome everyone to our monthly community campfire. My name is Danielle Negrin, and this is the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. This is June 17th, 2021, and we are so honored to be bringing this conversation to you today about the intersection of pharmaceuticals and recovery from them using psychedelics. And this is such an important conversation that we're bringing to our community at large. I do want to just give a brief disclaimer that we're going to be talking about some kind of trigger warning subjects here today. And the intention of this talk is to really educate our community about what's happening in pharmaceuticals and the depth of what's happening in that area and the addiction that's coming from them, and also highlighting the recovery process that can emerge and how we can alchemize this into building a new foundation for health and healing in our society. And we are not here to demonize pharmaceuticals in any way, but today we are going to be speaking about some of the challenges that do come from this epidemic that has kind of plagued a lot of our mental health care system. And thank you so much for being a part of our membership community. It's such an honor to have each one of you here today. We are the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. We are 501c3 that's devoted to an evolutionary healing community that's helping unlock global health culture and helping educate people about the transformative capacity of psychedelics while honoring our indigenous lineages. So, Emily, I will pass it off to you.
Hi, I am Emily, the sorceress of the Psychedelic Society, and I'll be helping host today. This conversation will be held between Danielle and Amanda. So just to give you a brief bio on what to expect from our speakers, Miss Amanda Rodrigo has been a leader in the behavioral health field of nursing for over a decade, and she has not only cared for patients, but also developed hospital policies, detox protocols, crisis teams, inpatient units, and training programs. She offers this professional experience along with her training in dialectical behavior therapy, introduction to psychedelic therapy, microdosing, as well as her personal experience of breaking free from big pharma to her current project, a pharmaceutical detox program with community and coaching. Amanda heals, coaching to your ideal self. And then we have Danielle Negrin, who is the executive director here at the San Francisco Psychedelic Society, founder of Psychedelic Recovery, on the founding team of Decriminalize Nature Oakland, and on the advisory board for Project New Day. She specializes in building conscious community, providing education into the use and science of psychedelics, addiction recovery services, and integration. Danielle is dedicated to exploring mental health, trauma recovery, personal development, and overcoming substance abuse through integrative techniques with psychoactive substances. The intention of her work is to help people and communities through sacred intentional practice to ultimately make this a better world for us all to live in. So excited for this potent discussion, ladies. So I will let you take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Emily. So Amanda, it is such an honor to have you here today. Thank you so much for your story, all that you've been through, and we're really looking forward to unpacking that with our community today. As we know, pharmaceuticals help a lot of people, and a lot of our society does focus on the benefit of pharmaceuticals and how many people that they help, and there's so many different advertisements about them, and it's really flooded with information about, you know, these life-saving tools. But what we commonly hear about is sort of the shadow side and what's really happening inside of these treatment centers and rehabilitation centers. So we'd love to kind of hear from, let's start off with hearing your perspective of being a nurse in this realm, and you know, give us a brief background of where you were working and what you were seeing and what brought you here today.
Okay. Well, I feel like it's a blessing to be here with you, Danielle. Thank you for having me. And I can tell you that I have been working within the healthcare system for the past decade, and I have held a, variety of roles. working the floor, interacting with patients, as well as working within leadership, management, administration, training, etc. And I really, all of my work has been here in Chicago. That's where I am located. But I did work for one of the largest healthcare corporations in the United States. So the work really like translated throughout the entire country. And what I saw was a lot of pros and cons. I could see a lot of flaws and I can see a lot of potential. And I would like to, try and stay as neutral as possible when discussing these and just stating the facts, because there are a lot of statistics that are out there for the public if they know where to look. And I can tell you where to look.
Excellent. So yeah, let's start kicking it off. And I'd love to kind of just hear from your perspective, like, about the pharmaceutical model and some of the patients that you were working with. What were some common themes that you were seeing, such as like diagnoses and reasons in which patients were using pharmaceuticals? And what was your goal?
Okay. So, I mean, it's very, very broad. Like mental health treatment is a pretty broad category. But if we were focused on like adult inpatient psychiatric, what it looks like is essentially crisis management to be admitted at the inpatient level. This is the highest level of care. So this is for the most severely acute to meet criteria to be admitted to the hospital. And what we would see is sometimes there'd be like someone who comes in and has no idea what's going on. They have no psychiatric history. They've never been in this type of situation before. And they come, they learn, and they leave. And that was like one type of patient. And then there appeared to be the large population of more institutionalized individuals who were considered frequent flyers, often termed that way, and appeared to become more and more dependent upon the system as time went on. It actually appeared as if their illness became more severe and more a part of them as a person over time. And typically that would also be associated with more pharmaceuticals being prescribed to them. So someone may start getting prescribed one med to them, and then over time, they may be prescribed 5 meds. And that's something that was typically seen.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining that. And from my understanding, that's called polydrugging. Just to give our membership community a little bit of background and on myself, I was prescribed pharmaceuticals at the age of 16 for anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And I was put on one anti-anxiety medication that led me to leaving high school on 8 different medications. And I stayed on this cocktail of 8 medications for like 12 years and just rotated through. I went through like over 100 different prescribed medications and was told that this was like normal and a normal practice, and that I would have to stay on medications for my entire life. And even though when they didn't work, they would just recycle and start a new medication, or the side effects that I would get from certain medications, I would be prescribed other medications just to cover up the side effects. Amanda, I know that you've seen a lot of that in your practice, and can you speak to sort of that practice of prescribing one drug to cover up the side effects of another drug?
Well, it appears as though pharmaceuticals are developed to have like an interlink between each other that one works better with another. And the side effects of one are relieved by another. And if you're going to prescribe one, well, then we'd recommend that you also take this one with it. And in the event that this one no longer works, well, if we add this one now, they just appear to be very, very linked and developed that way.
And generally, were you seeing that like doctors were spending a lot of time with the patients to understand which pharmaceuticals were best to prescribe them? Were they doing tests on people to understand like which ones were appropriate for people, or how did they come to the decision to put people on these different cocktails of medication?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's their job. Their job is to prescribe. That's their first line treatment every time. So unless the patient or an advocate specifically asks and requests for something outside of allopathic treatment, that will be the baseline. And statistically, on average, it's a 7-minute appointment that will determine what medication and if any changes need to be made within that 7 minutes. The most common tests that I see ordered are lab draws, where they will check like your biology, your physical biology, examine your blood and see some levels. And that is for harm reduction, because certain medications do deplete certain blood cell types and so forth. They can raise glucose levels in blood, etc. So then it is pretty standard practice and harm reduction to then grab some blood, check it out prior to administering or prescribing a medication.
Thank you. And generally, were you seeing that people were experiencing a lot of healing and transformation from these polydrug psychiatric medications? Were people getting to the root of their trauma, or was it more of a kind of management of symptoms?
You know, I always loved when I did have a patient who would work towards getting to the root cause of their mental illness. It was like a day in a candy shop for me. And I would love to talk things out and work together with the individual who had intrinsic motivation to do that. It was more of a rarity that I would personally like have a patient like that on my unit or my floor. It saddens me to say that it does appear over time when seeking treatment within the healthcare system, intrinsic motivation to find transformative change within internally declines and becomes more dependent upon external sources to heal, to deal.
What were these external forces that people were relying on? Was it pharmaceuticals and other practices, or was it generally just the pharmaceuticals?
I would say pharmaceuticals and I guess consulting with other individuals. It appears as if though they became less in touch with themselves, their core authentic selves, and they were becoming more disconnected from their intuition, their own like inner healing intelligence. They weren't really trusting themselves and their thoughts, and seemed to really identify with the illness or diagnosis or the treatment that they were receiving more than themselves, which we know does happen over time. If like you are told something about yourself multiple times over and over again, you start to believe it. It starts to become more and more true.
Absolutely. It's such interesting dynamic, because someone goes in to get help and they don't really understand what's happening to them. And then they're given a diagnosis to kind of label what it is that they're experiencing, or multiple diagnoses. And also to those diagnoses are to have a rationale to put them on certain medications. And then these patients can feel so, like for myself, I just felt so lost, and I was so like just so much pain inside. And then I really started identifying with the diagnoses that I was giving, and it was making me kind of sick to feel like a victim to them in a way, and like a trap, and thinking that there was something internally wrong with me, that I had to keep looking outside of myself to take these different pharmaceuticals in order to heal myself, when, you know, so much of what we learn from the psychedelic way and these psychedelic medicines is to find that inner healer within, and that, you know, we are the medicine ourselves, and we don't need anything outside of ourselves to heal ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is so powerful, and such a paradigm shift and completely opposite approach.
In terms of just on that note, I come from a history of going to a lot of 12-step meetings and to treat addiction. And so much, like the first step in the 12 steps is you're powerless to your addiction. And generally when you go to meetings, you have to admit that, you know, you have this disease of addiction, you are an addict. And if anyone says, many people know the power of manifestation. When we say, I am anything, that ultimately you become that thing, and you keep repeating that over, and it kind of keeps you in this cycle of addiction, or this cycle of identifying with a certain mental health illness or disorder. So from your perspective, you know, having these diagnoses with these certain programs in which people have to kind of succumb to these certain labels, do you find that helpful for some people in the healing process? Or if you could teach a certain way, how would you like to see people identify and heal themselves?
Okay, that was a really loaded question. Let me start by saying that first, like, because this population is somewhat of a vulnerable population, right? If they're seeking treatment for themselves, that when determining their provider, at times it does appear as though they're almost gaslit a little bit in order to fit in and make it easier to like category the symptoms and kind of like compose something for this patient to fit into and keep them in that. And what that does is it really prevents someone from growing. And so much to the point where I had a patient who I was working with one time who told me that she was an eating disorder and that's all she'll ever be in life. And she actually identified with a disorder more than just being a human or like herself as a person. It was almost like she forgot who her authentic self was. And that was really sad. How I would approach it is slightly different. I believe that approaching someone as a human, meeting them where they're at, not trying to change them, but just holding space for them and being a supportive person, providing education and like offering, hey, this is what it looks like long-term if you want to stay in this lifestyle. And this is what it looks like if you don't. Both ways are hard or difficult, but what would you like to do? What are your goals? And kind of approaching it that way. Also removing the stigma or like labeling someone as a criminal because they have a condition that typically doesn't promote positive change as well. And as we know, it needs to be that intrinsic motivation in order for it to be genuine and sustainable change. And also including mind, body, and soul approach. That appears to create that genuine sustainable change and also be overlooked in the healthcare system. What it seems like, or what I've seen, is that the soul is very often overlooked in the healthcare system. In fact, you could be diagnosed with a psychotic disorder if you were to speak about any mystical or spiritual experiences or thoughts that you have. And also the mind-body connection is kind of overlooked because at initial evaluation, if you present as if this might be a disorder of the mind, you go to one hospital. But if you present as if it may be a disorder of the body, you go to an entirely different one. And the medical records are kept separate. So that really limits the ability to integrate both body, mind, and soul. And it appears to be to the patient's deficit, as it's not promoting that genuine, sustainable change. They're just trying to follow some rules.
I love what you said about helping the patient find their authentic self and leading them on a path to setting their own goals and discovering who they are, and ultimately interweaving that to the mind-body connection, spirit connection. From your experience working with psychedelics, do you feel like these psychedelic medicines can ultimately help us integrate on a mind, body, spirit level?
Absolutely. I can speak for myself personally and say that microdosing psychedelics allowed me greater insight to myself and allowed greater connection to my authentic self, and allowed me to cultivate a sense of love for myself, and a sense of forgiveness for myself, and a sense of trust as I got back to my intuition and back to who I was as like my authentic self. And that is what allowed me to break free from big pharma. It gave me that strength, that inner healing knowledge and intelligence to end a relationship with a substance that I had been kind of using as a crutch. I no longer need it anymore. And I do believe that healing is a potential for others too.
That's amazing. Was that like a slow transition to letting go of that crutch that you were relying on? Or did you find that to be sort of a byproduct of the microdosing?
A little bit of both. I knew that I wanted to end this relationship, but you know how it goes. Sometimes like your desires don't always match up with your current behaviors, right? We're in that default mode, like, oh man, I know I should, I know I don't want to, right? So I already had that mindset prior to going into microdosing. And then it was pretty funny because I thought like in my nurse brain that I was going to like write out this entire like taper plan and everything for myself. And then all of a sudden one day I realized, oh my gosh, I've been like accidentally missing a few doses. And I was like, you sneaky little mushrooms, you started doing it for me. You know what I mean? Like, wow, thank you. And it really gave me like, I started to actually building a relationship with the mushrooms instead, you know, and with myself. And it was that connection along with connecting with like Mother Nature and increasing holistic interventions that allowed me to break free from big pharma.
I love that. I think that's such a beautiful transition. And I really like what you said about how the mushrooms were helping you find a relationship with yourself and really look inward. And I think, from my experience too, being on pharmaceuticals for so many years, it's like it was carrying me along and they're probably keeping me alive, but I wasn't really looking internally, and they were a crutch that I was heavily reliant on to control my mood and to kind of keep the trauma and issues that I was ultimately like suppressing within myself. And it was really hard to look inward and to unpack my consciousness. so thank you for sharing how, you know, they helped you find, like, go inward. And I too felt that experience with psychedelics of just peeling back the layers of the onion of our consciousness and finally having the opportunity to break these chains of the pharmaceuticals and to be able to start healing and looking inward and really digging and getting to the root of what's leading us to self-soothe in the first place.
Yes, I love that, because a lot of experts on addiction will tell you that addiction is a normal behavior because it's normal for humans to want to, like, end their suffering. No one's gonna be sitting in fire and be okay with it. They're going to want to make any attempt and any effort to get the F out of the fire. And so that's normal to want to escape. And that unresolved traumas often result in addiction. So by having more insight and more of an opportunity to look inward and start resolving some things of the past and start healing, that also increases the chances to be more independent and dependent upon yourself to heal and deal.
I really love your perspective on addiction and not demonizing those that experience addiction and looking at it as a normal reaction to feeling some pain and insecurity and trauma and disconnection with oneself. And I think that approach is really helpful to people that struggle with addiction, because there's so much shame that keeps people in that state of addiction because they feel shameful or they feel like they have to hide or that they're doing something wrong because they're soothing themselves. But if they look at it like they're, you know, there's this fire, this pain within them, and it's what's helping them be able to survive throughout that fire. And if we can find ways to figure out what that fire is and ultimately start to settle that fire, unpack that fire, integrate that fire, the addictive tendencies and need to keep it escaping that fire will dissolve. And I think that's really where psychedelics are so powerful, with like shining that light on the trauma, on the pain in a controlled, compassionate, expanded state, to be able to see, okay, like this is where it's coming from. And I'm soothing myself because I'm trying to support myself as I deal with this inner pain. And like, what steps can I take to start to put out that fire?
Yes, I love that. And what is shame but more suffering? So if we increase the suffering, then we increase the chance of relapse or the chance of self-soothing with an external symptom. So by placing shame, really all we're doing is like harming our clients even more. But by approaching and not saying like, what's wrong with you, but by saying, what happened to you? You know, who hurt you? Let's talk about that, because that seems like it was pretty effed up. Might be nice to talk about it, unpack it a little bit. Let's start there. You know, the addiction started as a solution to a problem. So what was the problem? What was it that took you to this to begin with? Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. And how is the addiction serving you? How is it helping you? Especially chronic use. It's people, you know, like I've been addicted for many, many years, and I stayed addicted because it was serving me in some capacity. It was helping relieve me from that pain. And from your experience and now the work that you're starting to do, if someone was in an active state of addiction, what would you say to them in order to start to put out that fire? And like, how would you guide them into a place of starting to create actionable steps for transformation?
Yeah. Definitely motivational interviewing. So that is just trying to determine within yourself, you know what I mean? It's just like asking some questions that just kind of prompt and guide you with your journey to determine what are your core values? What is it that you believe in? What are your goals with your life? and let's evaluate and look at this relationship with this substance. And let's just talk about it and see where the goals are for you. And it could just start with like staying stable and not using more, or like using a slightly less, you know, and that could be their only goal that they want for the time. Okay, cool. We can just work with that. And like by making it open-ended, you know, like, hey, Danielle, in 6 months from now, if you wanted to go and use again, then you sure could. You know, that's your choice. If you reevaluate at 6 months and say, you know what, like working with Amanda and trying to get sober, this isn't really for me. I think I'd rather go back to it. Then you're free to do so. Like, that's your choice. But let's see what it's like over the next 6 months. And then let's reevaluate it. And let's just look objectively on how your life has changed for both the better and the worse. So I think that having the client as like an active participant in their own treatment is something that's really important, and could prevent a little bit of what I did see in the healthcare system with the dependency.
I think that's so beautiful. And I love how I can already tell that you're going to be fabulous, and you are fabulous at helping motivate people through their transformation process. And, you know, they just brought back this vision of myself when I was stuck on so many different pharmaceutical drugs and in different rehab centers. And the doctors would just tell me, you know, so these are the drugs we're putting you on, and not even ask for really my consent. And ultimately I became addicted to these prescribed drugs, and I didn't feel like I was an active participant in that. So I'm curious, from your profession, did you see patients get dependent and addicted to these psychiatric drugs that they were prescribed? And do you see it as a consensual drugging?
Okay, so I'd like to play a game. For anyone who's not comfortable, please don't answer. But who has been prescribed pharmaceuticals? All right, so I would like to know who has heard the following of what I'm going to state to you, which is an accurate and complete medication education. So Danielle, I'm putting you on Prozac, which this medication falls under the classification of SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So what this does is increases the amount of the neurotransmitter serotonin in your bloodstream. And we believe that serotonin has a positive effect on mood. So hopefully the more serotonin you have, the better mood you will have, okay? It helps limit the reuptake of this neurotransmitter into the presynaptic cell. Now, I must warn you that this medication, it is slightly disputed due to the benefits may be outweighed due to the side effects, which are more prominent in the adolescent or geriatric population. Oh, I must also tell you, there is a high risk of dependence associated with this medication. So first, your body builds a tolerance to the medication, which is described as the body's diminished response to a substance as it's been exposed to the body repeatedly over a period of time, as your body naturally adapts to its presence. Then your body builds dependence, which means if you stop taking this medication, you will experience symptoms of withdrawal, which can be physical or mental side symptoms ranging from mild to life-threatening. You want to take these meds?
Well, do you think that they're good for me?
Well, I can tell you that I've been prescribed 10 psychotropic meds, and I never once heard that I just stated. And I would like to know, has anyone else heard that when they were prescribed meds? A full, accurate, and complete medication education that went along with it?
Right.
I mean, it kind of seems like it's being overlooked when these medications are being prescribed. Not really sure why. Could be the bonuses that are applied, you know, with the less amount of time that you spend with the patients or with the more meds that you prescribe. But ultimately, I can say it does appear to be slightly non-consensual, because how can you consent if you don't have the full accurate description of something? Is that considered a full accurate consent?
You know, you bring up a great point, Amanda, around the explanation, as I was never told that any of the drugs I was taking would cause me to be reliant, addicted, that they would cause withdrawal at all. And yeah, I think we should open it up to our membership community with, you had asked this question of Amanda, who is anyone, if anyone feels open to sharing with us if they have had experience with pharmaceuticals and if they were ever fully educated on the risks and the benefits.
So I think I'll talk for a minute. I was only on those kinds of drugs for about 9 months in my life. And I was a chiropractor. So going on those, I thought they would be life-saving. But the presentation was wonderful from both of you. Danielle, your questions were so perceptive. And Amanda, you know, first of all, the pharmaceutical model is repeat business. So whatever they put in those drugs are meant to addict you for life.
Yes.
So honestly, the fact that you are here and knew that there was another way is a miracle of consciousness.
But I escaped the matrix.
Yeah. So it's against the matrix. And almost any time, the way I look at it, it's like anytime we work with plant medicine, we are going against the matrix now. Yeah. And the addiction that I see a lot of is a sort of trying to numb yourself to deal with the lack of meaning in life. So I'm curious then, you know, in working with your clients, so I take it you work with private clients. You don't do this in the hospital or?
Correct. So Joan, I'm actually transitioning right now as I leave the career in the healthcare system to branch out on my own. And I'm starting a coaching business of a pharmaceutical detox program, which will consist of, like a medication taper plan, like charted, like guided journaling, holistic care plans, and community and coaching.
So do you take people through using mushrooms, say, for detoxing? Is that part of your protocol?
It can be. It can certainly be integrated into the plan. It absolutely can. If that's their choice and they would like to, sure, we can include that.
Isn't that interesting? Because I think the thing about mushrooms, and I also like the other thing you said, was that the shrooms already told, like, you didn't even think about taking that drug for a while. Like, it changes you because you're under their guidance now. And that's another thing, I think, for health and wellness. So do you see it in your practice then helping to integrate body, mind, and spirit?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think that is really a crucial element to be included if you are looking to make that genuine sustainable change, is to include your soul and like your creativity, you know, and that's really important and can be amplified with the use of microdosing.
Well, you just reminded me of some interesting things. Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly, but I think this is not for the fearless. This is asking people who want to start taking, this is an activation. When you throw those pills away and you take that journey that both you and Danielle took, and everyone here might have taken, you're yeah, you're breaking the matrix, and now you're saying, I'm ready to become an awakened soul.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more than, suddenly you're not just paddling in the water and treading water to survive. You're being asked to do something. And that is such an un-American healing modality. Yes. Like the patient has to do something.
Yes.
Stop being a patient. They have to actually, wake up.
Be the leader of their own health.
I like that.
Yes, that's what you have to do in order to swim against the current. And what makes it a lot easier is if you have supportive community and coaching to help you swim against the current. It's not going to be easy. It is a personal journey, but for those who are willing to embark on it, I do believe healing is a potential.
I think there's so much of our current paradigm has us look outside of ourselves for answers and to rely on external forces. And it's about like choosing, which forces are we positively helping to encourage our own path of that empowerment. And
yes, I agree. And that like having that connection with yourself and being able to having that ability to objectively evaluate if something is a positive or a negative in your life is really important, because at the time of being prescribed or seeking pharmaceutical treatment, it may be a positive in your life. You may really need it, and it could really serve you positively. And over time, it should be regularly reevaluated and reassessed. And I think that's also something that was slightly overlooked, as if someone is meeting with this person who's taking the substance and actually reevaluating and reassessing in an accurate and providing that medication education. Because it does appear as though that's very often overlooked, and we're just going to put them on it and then just kind of keep them on it. Unless the client themselves start making efforts on their own, I don't see it. I haven't seen it in my career that the physician takes it upon themselves to have this conversation and then start a taper or a discontinuation plan.
There is none.
And from what you've seen, are these psychiatric drugs, are they tested for long periods of time on, in the studies that they go
through? I just remembered a part of my medication education I must have forgotten, Danielle. I meant to tell you, I don't know how long you plan on taking this med, but it's only been studied for 6 months, and then they stopped studying it for some reason.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's just such an interesting part, of like, there's a lot of stigma that goes towards psychedelics from the mainstream of like, oh, psychedelics, there isn't like, where is the research and the long-term research and the impact that it's going to have on people's brains when there's like hundreds of different pharmaceutical drugs that are only studied for at least 6 months long at a time. And there's patients that are put on them for their whole life and long-term. And from my experience, they helped me for a short amount of time. And I found out like one of the medications I was on called Xanax, which is one of the most highly prescribed medications in the whole world. There's 280 million people that are have been prescribed it, something crazy like that. You're not supposed to be on it for longer than 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. And I was on that for 12 years. And there's people that was the hardest medication for me to get off of. It was 100 times harder than heroin. So why do you think it is that these pharmaceuticals are more challenging to recover from than street drugs?
It appears to be developed that way, secondary to money, power, and control over human people and lives. It is very true that at the inpatient detox setting, we'll detox off of both heroin and then synthetic or pill versions of opiates. And the synthetic versions last in the body system for significantly longer, 3 to 5 times longer, and therefore are that much more longer, difficult, and complicated to detox off of. But the insurance company won't cover them for that long. So that was very profound contradiction right there. You're smart for picking up on that though, Danielle.
Well, I guess my lived experience picked up on it, unfortunately. But I do want to look at all of this addiction that we speak of, this dependency I try to view it now as a gift. And, you know, it got us here, that what you experienced with pharmaceuticals, it got to where you are, the experience that you had as a nurse and all that you've been through. Can you speak to kind of like, how has this been a gift for you ultimately? How can you alchemize it in that way?
Okay, well, I love what you just said. Something I believe in is that our symptoms are trying to communicate to us and tell us where to do the work, right? So our triggers are our teachers. What triggers you teaches us, reveals what still needs to be healed. And the approach to them, if we just want to run from our triggers and our symptoms and silence them and suppress them, and, you know, we don't want to feel this is uncomfortable, you know, that typically ends in addiction. However, if we sit with the uncomfortable symptom that we're experiencing and say, why are you there? You know, let's try to give it a name. Let's try to engage with it in conversation. You can kind of peel back the layers. You can kind of say like, oh, I see, this might be a trauma response. And this trauma response may be trying to protect me because of like past experiences that I've had in life. So this symptom of like uncomfortable emotion is trying to warn me, you know, and so I'm going to let my trauma response know, thank you very much. I appreciate you. And also, we don't need you right now. Then once they're acknowledged, the triggers and those symptoms and those feelings, you can start engaging with them and you can start managing them a little bit better rather than trying to avoid or suppress. That's something that I have found for myself personally, that in exploring my own addictions and behaviors, then I was able to learn more about myself and why they developed in the first place. And if I can address why they developed, then nothing's going to develop. So it can be, you know, an addiction, it can be some sort of illness, but whatever the manifestation is, it's there to teach you something if you have the ability to learn, which is difficult. You know, it's difficult to like give up control, but also necessary for like positive change and to grow.
Amanda, I just feel so refreshed by your perspective, and especially the part that you said that, you know, what people are experiencing, the triggers are meant to teach people. And if they have the capacity to look at them and learn, then they can start to unravel these addictive patterns of running away or self-soothing or suppressing them. And I think that's such a beautiful message, and also intertwined so beautifully with these psychedelic substances, because as we spoke about earlier, the psychedelics are kind of that spotlight on the wounds, the spotlight on the triggers, and the capacity to really look at things from a new perspective in a new way, and be used as a tool to to view the triggers, to view the wounds, and ultimately, we are the ones that are going to be unpacking that and healing that and integrating that into our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. So my program is largely inspired by the microdosing movement course, because I really respect your format, how you put it together, and the effectiveness of it. I experienced firsthand. And I've done a training program or two, so like I'm a pretty tough critic, I feel like. And your class was excellent. So the combination of like educational content plus the journaling prompts and the community and the coaching, right, is like very that's a concept that I am trying to replicate, right? And what I can say about the psychedelics and the journaling is, for me personally, what I experienced was a like break from the default mode network, where I didn't believe that I was a creative person. I genuinely believed I'm a nurse and that's all I am. And then I took some psychedelics and started journaling, and I journaled for the first time in my life. I wrote like 12 pages. I'm like, I'm a writer. I didn't even know that. And started exploring more and more about myself. Oh my gosh, I have childhood trauma? What? I thought everybody had that. Like, oh my gosh, this is, and I do like, after experiencing the effectiveness of that firsthand is why I am including it in the program. The journaling is like opening an inner dialogue with yourself. And that is like opening direct access and communication to that inner healing intelligence with the assistance of psychedelics. That can be profoundly healing. That has the potential to change the negative or break the negative patterns and behaviors and default mode network, and really opens up a catalyst for healing and wholeness and wellness.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And I really appreciate how you spoke to the, it's not just about the psychedelics, but it's about that and discovering that inner healer, that inner intelligence, doing the work of journaling, finding ourselves, all these other practices that people do. Can you speak a little bit to some of the practices that would accompany any kind of healing modality of psychedelics that would be helpful for people to transform their lives with?
Somatic healing is really important, as trauma finds itself in your nervous system, in your body. So if you can help improve that mind-body connection with physical activity, moving your body, also mental fitness, increasing meditation, things like that, I think are really important. Oh, also, if you go to a shamanic healer, one of the first things they'll ask is, when did you stop dancing, singing, like creating from your soul? And that has been shown to be profoundly healing. I mean, people overlook that, and we tend to, I guess, because our society and culture puts so much emphasis on work and like really puts our value very much aligned to it. Like when you meet someone new, one of the first things often asked is, so what do you do for a living? And it's almost like you can feel them kind of forming an opinion based on like how much money you make. Is it more than me? I better work harder and work more. That doesn't really put a lot of emphasis on dancing and like singing and like enjoying life, creating from your soul. But in all actuality, if that is completely removed and neglected from us as a being, we won't be whole. And I think that's the ultimate goal, is to be a whole, like well individual as much as possible, right?
Absolutely. We need to encourage people to do more dancing. Love that.
Dance party.
As we start to come to a close, I'd love to just kind of touch a bit more on psychedelics and how, seeing a new frontier for healing and life beyond medication and breaking out of the traditional healthcare system. So are there certain psychedelics that you feel hopeful for as a path to recovery for people?
I don't think I can list a psychedelic I don't feel hopeful for, to be honest. Based on my knowledge and my experience, and the research that I have done, and like the clinical trials results that I've read, it was really digging deep into the research and searching for some truth that for the illness that was consuming me. That's what led to this, is that I was suffering with moderate to severe, at times, PTSD. And I sought pharmaceutical treatment within the healthcare system for 2 or 3 years, 10 different meds. I sought psychotherapy, and it barely touched the surface. It really didn't address any of the inner turmoil at the root cause. So that led me to find something. I was desperate and I wanted to relieve my suffering. And I stumbled upon the clinical trial results, and really, I read them for like hours and really tried to gather as much information that I could, and then kind of evaluated it on like a pros cons analysis, like a risk benefit analysis. And I kept on coming to the same conclusion, which is that I can find significant potential for healing, and I'm having trouble finding any negative results or effects on mental health. And so therefore, it led to my decision to pursue psychedelic treatment. And I genuinely believe that I got my life back. And the person I am right now was not the person I was a year ago or 2 years ago. And that, again, I believe healing is a potential for everyone. And that these psychedelics appear to be like the future of treating mental health and mental illness. To me, it kind of seems like the pandemic brought a lot of like a collective trauma response, right? And so now a lot of what was going underlying is now brought to the surface, and that us as a society and as a population have some choices to make when looking for treatment for this that's happening globally. And that it really does appear as though the decrim and everything that's going on, this could be a benefit to our society as a whole. This could be the catalyst for healing.
Well, I completely agree. And I want to leave it at that. I think that's so beautiful. I think that's so profound that you just painted that picture for us. And I feel so much hope from that statement. And I just want to give a lot of gratitude to the psychedelics for all the healing that they've provided in your life, and for bringing us together in this way, for bringing our membership community together in this way. And, finally, we have some answers to help the addiction epidemic, the pharmaceutical epidemic. There is a pathway, and it's, I don't want to view these medicines as like a cure in any way, but they're definitely a tool to help people heal themselves. And we finally have a pathway forward that we're paving. And like, what a gift. This is not a life sentence of drug dependence. This is true healing from the inside out. And thank you so much, Amanda, for who you are, the wisdom that you speak. You just radiate light, you radiate love, you radiate so much inspiration, and I'm so excited to see what you birth in your new life, in your new healing path, in your coaching path. And I'm just super honored to be able to work with you, and to continue to grow with you, and to just see how many people you help. And thank you so much for being here today, for speaking to our community, and thank you to all the future yous and all the people in the future that you impact. I'm just so grateful for you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to tell the community a little quick backstory on my pharmaceutical program, is that I actually was awoken out of my sleep at 4 o'clock in the morning by the ancestors the night before our microdosing movement ceremony to write this long-winded document to Danielle on like, the people need to hear this, and like, this is what pharmaceutical detox protocols it consists of. And I wrote it all out and like sent it to her. But at that time, I actually lacked the confidence in myself to pursue this project. And over time, under Danielle's and the Society's support, and attending more community events and meetings, and on my own personal health journey, I now believe that this is actually my quest, and that I must pursue this for the community that I found healing within. And that this has, it appears as though the universe just like cleared out whatever professional other things I had going on and put it right in front of me. It was like, remember Danielle? You know, call that chick up, okay? And I'm really, really thankful and grateful to you, Danielle, and to the community. I got the sorceress, you know, who's been really supporting me and putting this together. Like my co-facilitators with the Death Cafe have been really supportive and offering their, you know, wisdom and feedback to me as well. And together, I feel really confident that we can produce something really beautiful and healing for our community.
I feel the same. Thank you so much, Amanda. So honored and grateful to work with you in this way, and excited to see what you birth. And you are absolutely supported and by our community.
All right, and I'm still your fangirl.
Feeling is mutual. So let's open it up to our membership community, and to get some feedback on the conversation today. Thank you all so much for being here and staying and being a part of this conversation. And we'd love to hear how this resonated with you, and if you have any questions from the community.
All right, I've got a question. I also went through a benzodiazepine taper, and boy, that's no joke. It's the real deal. And when I experienced that, I was really lucky to have been connected with a doctor who understood all the protocols and was totally sympathetic. And only later did I realize how lucky I was. Mm-hmm. But I remember my primary care physician telling me that it was ridiculous to really taper at all. He said, cut it in half for 2 weeks, and then that's it. Mm-hmm. It was completely unrealistic. A pharmacist, I remember doing some eye rolling, and there wasn't really much knowledge about tapering protocol, let alone the whole idea of tapering. People weren't even expected to white knuckle it. It just wasn't recognized that there was much to it. So I'm just curious what you've seen over the years. That was some years ago.
Yeah.
Is it more accepted now? Do people know about tapering protocols and how difficult this can be, and how to get patients off these meds without them relapsing and then coming back more wounded than ever, thinking that they're more broken and with less hope than ever?
Well, what I've seen is that they're not even really studied for long-term use, and that there isn't any like budget or funding that has been provided to that. So if a physician were to obtain data and familiarize themselves to understand these medications in a taper format like that, it would be because they truly cared about it and they independently went out and pursued that on their own, because there isn't much like funding or like emphasis placed on this from the system itself.
Is there not even really like an organic awareness? Like lots of doctors today have really changed their policies on opiates and things like that. There's so much press and news, but it seems like taking people off SSRIs and benzos especially hasn't changed at all.
Correct. Hopefully it's coming to that point of the epidemic, the opiate epidemic turnaround. So like so many years ago, they would do an audit on the hospitals. And if your patients rated their pain at a 5 or greater, and you did not offer them something to eliminate their pain, then you got fined. So it became standard practice in the hospital setting to say, hey, you have pain? Oh, he's got pain. You know what I mean? And let's just give him the fastest Band-Aid to relieve this pain, because we don't want to get fined, guys, you know? So that was what really pushed the opiate epidemic to begin with. And now that we're seeing, oh my gosh, now, like 10 years later, we're getting them all in and we're detoxing them. So now this has become public knowledge, and there's a much different process and protocol for prescribing opiates. That has not happened yet in the public sector like that, to the point where antidepressants or psychotropics are being reevaluated at time of prescription. It just hasn't happened yet. So right now, it's still very, very common to like walk into an office and then walk out with a prescription to a psychotropic. Hopefully that will be in the future though, that this will become more of a public awareness and knowledge that we're starting to see the need to detox off of.
Well, that's disappointing that it hasn't really moved forward. But just a follow-up question. There's all this talk about using psychedelics to help people to get themselves off SSRIs. And I hear that a lot at a lot of integration groups and on Reddit and things like that. And it seems like there's a lot of people that are seeing the value of that, but there's not really a protocol. It's sort of, whole new territory. And a lot of really different opinions on people saying, do a few giant doses psilocybin and see if that'll get you off SSRIs, or other people microdosing. So I'm just curious what you've seen and heard. Are there any protocols that are working? Is there anything, any anecdotal evidence of a way forward? I mean, how do psychedelics help people get off of these medications? What's our best shot?
Are you aware of any protocols that have been developed, Danielle, or in the making?
I am not aware of any protocols that have been developed. I
guess we have to make them.
I personally think that it's hard to say just because there's so many side effects. I definitely think there's some psychedelics, like I think the plant-based psychedelics can be helpful for the withdrawal process. Like mushrooms would definitely be helpful for the withdrawal process. We're going to be doing a course coming up really soon about Amanita muscaria, and it's specifically helpful to help people recover from benzodiazepine dependency. And it's starting to be looked at as the anti-anxiety mushroom. I would feel safer to see people fully withdraw off of medication and then use psychedelics for the withdrawal process. And I say that just because there's so many unknown contraindications that we aren't aware of. And I definitely think, like from my experience, ayahuasca was super helpful to snap me out of benzo withdrawal. Microdosing psilocybin mushrooms were very helpful for tremors and shaking and depersonalization that came from psychiatric drug withdrawal. But then there's other psychedelics like iboga or ibogaine that can be really dangerous for like benzodiazepine withdrawal or SSRI withdrawal. And I think we're just really pioneering this work together.
Yeah.
I have heard of people microdosing with LSD to kind of cope with some symptoms of psychiatric drug withdrawal. That's kind of where I would feel safest seeing this going, is people fully withdraw off them and then use psychedelics as this healing recovery tool.
I know Dr. Fadiman has a website, microdosingpsychedelics.com, I believe it is, that shows some interactions that have been identified.
Yep.
I would really agree that if you're going to be doing larger doses and really journeying, it's probably best done after the acute withdrawal is passed. There's so much happening when somebody's in the throes of coming off SSRIs. And a lot of it is just physiological and just the drugs working through. There seems to be some anecdotal evidence of microdosing helping people through that initial phase, but it's so hard to know what's happening there. But I've definitely known people who have gone through a taper or just dropped off their SSRIs and managed to get through the first 2 or 3 months. And then there seems to be this open wound. You know, a lot comes out. Maybe some of you have experienced, I know I have experienced it, where you're done with the real rough go of the physiological, you know, acute withdrawal. Now you're left with all of this trauma. Things are coming up now, and
Correct.
Those are hard to unpack. And that's when the anything from ketamine to psilocybin or whatever it is that works for you, some really hardcore healing can begin.
I definitely agree with that, especially as you start getting connected back and the symptoms are not as silenced or suppressed by the medication. Then yes, your triggers are going to come teach you. Your symptoms are going to try to communicate with you. And that is a perfect, ideal time to explore that, you know, assisted by psychedelics.
I really appreciate you sharing that, David, and also just, I want to honor you for all the work that you've done on yourself and all the healing that you've done through your addiction recovery dependency process. And I do know that actually kind of awoken my consciousness to hearing about a friend that used like ketamine in a clinic that helped him get off of his pharmaceuticals. So I do think that there are some like ketamine clinics that are helping people get off of pharmaceuticals actively while using ketamine as a tool.
Absolutely, yeah. There's now an interesting wave of really good physicians coming out of the woodworks, hearing about ketamine, and instead of just jumping on the money train, because it's easy to open a ketamine clinic and make nice money, but they're sort of looking for ways that they might become a prescriber, trying to figure it out. I know a lot of people that are interested. It's people that have worked in mental health for a long time and seen a lot of rough stuff and a lot of bad outcomes. And it really grinds on some of the providers. And a lot of them are warming to ketamine. And ketamine, it does seem to have this one indisputable quality, which is it's a great gateway to other psychedelics for people who are, well, for example, somebody like myself was sober for many, many years. And I mean sober, like sober, white knuckle sober. And would never have gone through all this psychedelic journey had I not had a safe point of entry that was doctor supervised and pharmaceutically safe. You get it from the farm, you know, and so that was my point of entry. So think about how many people could take advantage of things like mushrooms or ayahuasca or things that are scary for someone who's brand new and doesn't know anything about this. If their doctor or nurse had given them a path forward to explore their mind and try something new. So, you know, if only for that, ketamine is I'm always warm on ketamine. It's helped a lot of people.
That's
so.
A great point.
Yeah.
I think very highly of ketamine as well.
Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a lot of people that are going to want to have to feel safe entering in this path. And if there's a way for doctors to be able to prescribe this, you know, they'll definitely feel safe entering. And then other groups of people that will feel more safe and doing it on their own, or more of like a ceremonial context with facilitator in that capacity. So I hope we can kind of see like a smorgasbord of opportunities for people to have entry points into this work.
Absolutely, yeah. And more meditation too. So I always throw that in.
Absolutely.
Well, we know Amanda Heal's meditation is going to be great because Dave's going to help me figure it out.
Yeah. When people are getting off meds, they're the people that are the most likely to say, I tried to meditate, but I can't do it. Like, just not right now, it's too hard. But it's strangely easy to learn when you're in the middle of like some kind of, psychic nightmare. Sometimes that suffering opens up a window, and you can develop your meditation practice quickly out of desperation.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm really interested in that. So I look forward to talking more about it.
Great. So do I. And I definitely agree that once the external suffering gets to the point where you like, okay, I guess I'm going to go internal. And
yeah, once there's nowhere else to go. Suffering is a good teacher sometimes.
You know, without the suffering, you wouldn't have gotten to this point. I mean, Amanda, you'd still be that boring nurse forever, and the planet would not know your greatness. And that's, I think, the beauty of listening to your transformation. It's like, we all have an awakening moment, hopefully, on the planet, and this is yours.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
This is yours, and this is exciting. I enjoyed this very much. I'm learning, I'm doing some shows about plant medicine. I have people who want to talk to me about doing recovery and plant medicine. And so I'm just sort of listening in to see new everything and how you're framing it. And I think the more we can get away from pharmaceuticals on every level, by the way, it's the pharmaceutical revolution. But your body, once you get used to the plants talking to you, it's better not to have anything else. That's my point of view. Right, that's my point of view. So thank you, Danielle, for putting this on, and for you got to thank yourself for the addictions that got us all here. To be honest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a dysfunctional world. So. Yeah.
And I know, Joan, you have a background in working with helping people with addiction, and so curious about, your perspective and where you see this field going with addiction and psychedelics.
Oh my God. So I'm just so excited. First of all, to me, plant medicine and psychedelics is the rise of consciousness once again on the planet. It is the rise of creativity. It's going to be a renaissance in awakening for more people because it can open the door to that. So I think it's the most amazing miracle of freeing a conscious soul. That being said, yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, the mushrooms, particularly certain personalities like the mushrooms, they want more people to wake up, and they're sort of it's like spreading of this new consciousness. And I think you're at the forefront. I can hardly believe, okay, so I did LSD back in 1970 after I went and listened to, what was his name? Richard Alper. And, it was the big thing in those days to drop in, tune out, drop in. So until it went illegal and they tried to take all this away. So, and they try to, I see the pharmaceuticals as sort of, in a way, the dark energies on the planet taking out the most brilliant of people. It's like somehow you guys are all born, like once you get to know who you are, you're going to be brilliant. And so it's like the dark in the form of all of this said, we're going to take those people out. We're not even going to give them a chance unless they super want to wake up. Makes sense? That's my plant medicine philosophy. And I have a show that I just started, 420 Spiritual Living, and I'm going to bring on people on all sorts of aspects, especially recovery. So I'm just getting my feet wet too.
Cool. What platform is your show on?
Well, I'm on really YouTube and Facebook, and it just really depends.
Cool.
Other channels. I'm on a Super Collective channel.
What's your channel name?
Joan of Angels.
Joan of Angels?
Mm-hmm. She's also cool. Part of Portal to Ascension.
And you'll find me in Portal to Ascension too, yeah. And doing more work with them.
Portal to Ascension?
Portal to Ascension.
Cool.
Joan, I'm sorry. I don't mean to take us on a tangent, but so did you just say that you saw Richard Alpert in 1970?
Yes, it was.
Can we just go back to that? Because that's a pretty wild name drop, cool claim. Was he Ram Dass then? What was it? What happened? Well,
no, he was becoming Ram Dass. I sort of don't. I really shouldn't have said anything. I was in a spiritual movement, and we all went all together to see him, and it was a very profound. Those are very profound days. They're not replicated now. In the feeling of acid taking over, make love, not war. This generation was so sure that we would change the world. Mm-hmm. And through the consciousness of plants, really. Mm-hmm. And the system just came right down and said no more. So I remember being very profoundly moved. Yes, I think he was Ram Dass. Really, I wish I had my better memories of that, because he had a lot of spiritual teachings that we were talking about. He really talked about the consciousness of plants and God itself and going back to source. So
what an honor to see him in his prime. I would have loved to have been there.
It was a great time, but you know what? When I wake up and I see that this is all going legal, to me, this is an exciting time. Okay. This is an exciting time that you can go in the market and buy cannabis for whatever you need and then go and take your shrooms and microdose it. And we're talking about it. And it is, to me, because I'm 72, just to sort of be upfront about it, it's like, this is an amazing time. And I started plant medicine journeying in my 60s, and it changed my whole adult life. Okay. I'm the youngest 72-year-old I've met, with the most potential because of the plant medicine. So youngering with plant medicine too, because you remember who you are. It's exciting.
Man, you have a beautiful spirit.
Doesn't she?
Yeah.
And after my second plant medicine journey, and I was only on heart medicine, like Kana, sassafras, Danielle knows who I'm talking about, Armand's medicines. I got the call to paint 33 angels in 30 days. And I said, yes. So I suppose second component is, do you say yes when you get those calls? There's no protocol for that. You have to say yes.
Yeah.
So that's my experience. I'm happy to share. I think this is a great opportunity, Danielle. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us and for your wisdom that you speak and the light being and energetic vibration that you frequently just exude throughout the universe. I really feel such like a bright white flame from you, Joan.
Yeah, I would have never guessed you're 72, but you are the coolest 72-year-old I know, for sure.
I almost never say it because it's like giving out your diagnosis. Like, oh, I'm bipolar and,
right.
And this and that. So now everyone looks at you. But sometimes I tell people in a way as an inspiration, because, a diagnosis or an age is only that.
It's just your biological age. That's all.
But the plant medicine youngers you to your soul.
Oh, then it's just your numerical age.
Well, actually, it ages you because you realize how many lifetimes you've been here. So if you really think about it, 4 million.
You're wise.
72.
I'd love to continue to open it up to anyone else in our membership community that feels called to share with us about their experience and to integrate any parts of the talk that they heard today.
Well, I can't stop thinking about something you said, I think, Amanda, the other day. You were talking about when people are withdrawing off these psychiatric drugs, often they're put on more psychiatric drugs to manage that withdrawal. But then those with drugs for the withdrawal can be addictive themselves. So then they're stuck in the cycle. So with psychedelics, sometimes people who critique using psychedelics to get off pharmaceuticals will say, well, it's replacing one drug for another, but then people will have like one experience or like a small number of experiences and then suddenly, you know, be close to healed or not have the same struggles that they were having before. So I just wanted to kind of just put out there what you see the future could be or could look like with people moving towards these new healing modalities. And I mean, are we creating a whole new healthcare system for everyone? What do you think happens next?
Well, I think I listened to a podcast recently with Rick Doblin, who said that the difference between like the pharmaceutical model and his, you know, nonprofit is that MAPS is that they're looking to administer doses with the therapeutic change so as to not continuously hand out doses. That's not their goal, which seems to be different than the pharmaceutical model's goal, which is like repeated day after day after day. And I do hope that one day in our future, we can address the societal healthcare system. To be honest, that's like my goal before I die. I'm not lying. I wrote like a 30-year plan for my life. And this is what I would like to address before I die, is to really get in there and have some conversations. Who set the system up? How did it develop in the first place? Can we evaluate the effectiveness of it? Let's look at the stats logically, rationally, and evaluate and assess. How many people on this earth right now are ill, are sick, are addicted, are hurting themselves, are hurting other people, are hurting our environment? How is our healthcare system playing a role with that right now? What is the success rate? What are the stats looking like? Okay, where are the flaws? What are the potentials within the system? How can we revamp this?
I'm with you, sister. It's
yeah, right.
Work and not many people are looking at this.
Yeah, that's the problem. I've been having difficulty finding people to talk to about this.
Yeah,
I actually got like pretty pushed out of my previous career because I was asking these questions.
Well, that was a divine intervention by spirit, even though the way it went about was like so rough. And I imagine you're still dealing with things at work. And if you feel open to sharing with this community, I just think your story is so impactful. But that felt like like spirit put you on this path for a reason. We need you. We need your advocacy in this work.
And thank you, Danielle, for saying that, because I genuinely believe that it did happen for a reason, and that I found and enlisted in the microdosing movement course at that time that I was going through it for a reason. And that's what really gave me like the strength and the confidence to start filming YouTube videos of describing my experience through the healthcare system, because I experienced a lot. I took part in a lot of conversations, and I learned a lot. And I think this should be public knowledge. I would love for other people to hear it. And therefore, I wrote an 1.5-hour movie about my life in the healthcare system through this experience. And I broke it down into bite-sized pieces. And it all started with like the journaling prompts, the impression and flows. And I started recording them like in a vlog series into bite-sized chunks of information that can be like easily digestible of what it is like in the healthcare system. This is like my days of going through it. And these are my words that I wrote as I was going through it. And this is my pain that I felt as I was going through it.
I can just imagine you leading like a whole coalition of nurses, warriors from the healthcare system.
Oh man, well, I'm really, really glad that they are starting that study on psilocybin for frontline staff, because, oh my gosh, the frontline staff, they need some love, man. It's been tough out there for them. The burnout rates are so high. The rates of depression, of anxiety, of PTSD, of addiction with our frontline staff is so high. This is a population that can really be shown some love and some compassion.
Big time. Who's doing that study?
I read about it through Open Nurses. I would have to look it up to say so accurately.
I would think that most of the people in the healthcare industry, including the pharmaceutical industry, are well-intended people that have their own wounds and fears, and some of them are trying to survive, and some of them are ego-driven, and some of them got stuck in it, and a lot of people doing a lot of amazing work.
Absolutely.
And mental health care is a weak spot in most healthcare systems, I think. In a lot of countries, a lot of big countries, it's not really treated at all. I do a lot of work in Eastern Europe and in Asia, where they don't have any of these problems, because if you have depression or anxiety, they're not going to help you. It's stigmatized, and there's nothing available. And PTSD is not even a thing. So it's such a mixed bag.
Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely
agree. If you're in a trauma
agree.
center, then our Western medical approach is absolutely the best thing going. Right? If you're in a car accident, you show up at a hospital, it would be good if it happened in a large American city. But mental health, it's such a mixed bag. So I don't know. It's instead of really, it's so easy to point out the shortcomings of the healthcare field, but it does seem like America is also leading the charge on the decriminalization and the exploration of psychedelics. And MAPS is operating here and having great success. Europe seems to be following. So, you could also say that things are pretty good here. It's more promising here than in a country where there's literally nothing happening at all. And people are suffering in silence.
I would definitely agree with what you're saying. And I think that there are pros and cons and goods and bads and everything. And what I would personally like to see is just a little bit of a shift in the power. If it can be a little bit more equal as far as that. I can say that, I may be biased, but, I think that I'm one of the best nurses, right? That I genuinely have a heart for the patients. I genuinely care, and that I am outspoken and an advocate for them. And that both got me several promotions and also got me suspended, fired, pushed out. I mean, that's just my personal experience, is due to power.
I know it's tough to be a good nurse in our system. I've seen up close. Well, I'm excited about the work you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm happy that somebody is doing it. I think there are millions of people walking around wishing that they could get off those meds, but not having the confidence to try, or maybe having tried and blundered it because they had no guidance and gone back. And now there is a path forward for those people. And I think there's going to be a lot of them. I don't think you're going to have any shortage of clients.
Amanda, I have a question for you.
Hey, Sarah.
How do you care for your patients without bringing your work home?
I can't say that I can do that 100%. That I've always brought it home a little bit with me. And definitely at the beginning of my career, the boundaries were not very well developed at all. And that over time, with experience, it definitely becomes more developed and more like there's a difference between being friends with my psychiatric patients or being friendly with my psychiatric patients. And that those boundaries just tend to develop more naturally. And then also just taking time to self-care, like before and after a shift, to help like kind of ground and get back to myself, because it is definitely a possibility to take on the energy of other people and to start getting confused with between what's your emotions and what's their emotions when you're working with other people's emotions.
Especially as an empath.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sarah, for that question. Do you have any more feedback or comments about the talk today before we start to come to a close?
Thank you. It was a great talk, both of you, and everyone's comments. A lot to unpack.
Yes.
This is a great community. I feel blessed to be here with all of you.
Well, we feel the same, and thank you to everyone that came to this talk today and for being a part of our membership community and for your interest and support in this important topic.
Thank you guys for setting up this space, for holding it. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Happy Sunday. Wait, it's not Sunday. Happy Thursday.
You know, happy almost summer solstice though, which is coming up on Sunday. So
that's right.
Well, I'm gonna